84 years had passed, each one leaving its mark on her body and soul. She moved slowly through her home, feeling the weight of decades in her bones. The memories pressed against her mind, some sweet, most heavy, each reminding her of what had been lost, of what could have been different. She felt the burden of mistakes she could not undo, words spoken in anger, choices made in fear, and moments that could never be recovered. Even her achievements felt muted, overshadowed by the years of regret. Her life, once vibrant, now seemed a collection of faded moments struggling to keep meaning. She sighed deeply, a breath that carried the weight of a life fully lived, and wondered if peace would ever find her. The mirror reflected a woman she barely recognized. Her hair, silver and thin, framed a face etched with lines that told stories she wished she could forget. She touched her cheeks gently, tracing the paths of years. Each wrinkle spoke of nights spent crying, days spent worrying, moments lost to fear or sorrow. She thought of all the dreams that had slipped away, and a silent tear ran down her face. Even the small joys seemed distant now, buried under decades of self-judgment and longing. She whispered to her reflection, "Is there still time for me, Lord, or have I run out of chances?" She sat in her chair, hands folded in her lap, but the tears would not wait. They slid quietly down her cheeks, silent witnesses to a grief she could not express in words. No one came to notice. No one knocked at her door or asked how she felt. Even God, it seemed, was far away. Her sorrow was private, held tightly in the corners of her soul, weighed down by years of loneliness and neglect. She cried not for any specific loss, but for the life she had lived, for the self she had almost forgotten. She remembered the roads she hadn't taken, the letters she had never sent, the words she had never spoken. Each memory pressed like a stone on her chest, and she wished she could turn back time. Yet time moved relentlessly forward, and nothing could change what had passed. She mourned not only for mistakes, but for chances lost, for moments when courage failed her, for love unspoken, care left undone. Her life felt like a book with pages torn from the middle, and she could only stare at the gaps, wishing someone could rewrite the story. Alone in her quiet home, her mind replayed old regrets. Mistakes she had made decades ago returned with cruel precision. Words said in haste, moments of selfishness, opportunities ignored, they all haunted her silently. Even pleasant memories seemed tainted. She could not fully enjoy them, for each joy was shadowed by what she had lost or failed to do. She longed for someone to remind her of her worth, but the house held no voice except her own whispers. Her memory, once a source of comfort, had become a maze of sorrow. Every corner turned brought another pang of regret. And still, in the midst of this mental solitude, an unseen presence began to linger, quietly patient. She tried to pray, closing her eyes and whispering words she had known all her life, but the prayers felt hollow. The syllables barely touched her heart, as if they dissolved into the empty air. Faith, once alive, felt distant and fragile. She wondered if God could hear her anymore, or if her life of tears and mistakes had pushed him away. Each attempt at prayer ended in silence, and despair crept quietly back into the corners of her soul. She did not speak aloud anymore. The words were swallowed before they could leave her lips. And yet, somewhere beyond her hearing, he was already listening, waiting to touch the life she believed lost. Nightfall brought no relief. The darkness seemed heavier than the day. She sat by the window or lay in bed, watching the shadows stretch across her walls. Tears flowed silently, her body shaking with grief she had carried for years. No one came to comfort her, no hand held hers, no voice whispered love. She was utterly alone, and the world outside seemed unaware of her pain. Yet, in the quiet, a presence drew near, soft, tender, unwavering. Even in the depths of her despair, he was there, reaching into her heart without a word. She pressed her hands against her chest, wishing for a touch she could feel, a warmth she could not imagine. Her skin ached for connection, for the gentle reassurance of someone who cared. Every gesture, every sigh, every lonely breath echoed the yearning in her soul. She remembered what it was like to be held, to feel love not just in memory, but in reality. And in that ache, his hand rested lightly on her shoulder, unseen but undeniable. The loneliness that had shadowed her for decades began to tremble and shift. She was being touched, and the world, for the first time in years, felt a little less empty. She pressed her hands against her chest, wishing for a touch she could feel, a warmth she could not imagine. Her skin ached for connection, for the gentle reassurance of someone who cared. Every gesture, every sigh, every lonely breath echoed the yearning in her soul. She remembered what it was like to be held, to feel love not just in memory, but in reality. And in that ache, his hand rested lightly on her shoulder, unseen but undeniable. The loneliness that had shadowed her for decades began to tremble and shift. She was being touched, and the world, for the first time in years, felt a little less empty. The sensation spread slowly, from her chest to her shoulders, warming her as if sunlight had reached her bones. It was not a human hand, but a touch far more intimate, reaching where no words could reach, touching the deepest corners of her soul. Her breath caught, and tears flowed again, but this time mingled with relief. She realized that after all these years, someone had not abandoned her. Someone cared enough to stay, to meet her pain with tender presence. Her spirit, long tense and tight with sorrow, relaxed into the comfort she could not see, but could feel fully. Her chest lifted as if weight had been removed. The tightness that had haunted her for years began to dissolve. Her mind, which had circled endlessly through grief, felt a hint of clarity and peace. She breathed slowly, feeling each heartbeat as a silent conversation. For the first time in decades, she sensed that her life still mattered. She still had value. She was still loved. Her soul stirred like a dormant flame, flickering, trembling, but alive. And in that awakening, she realized that his touch was not temporary. It had begun to change her entirely. Tears flowed freely now, but they were different, lighter, cleansing, sacred. Each drop carried a fragment of grief that had burdened her for decades. Her sobs were prayers, each one heard, each one held. She no longer felt shame for crying. Her sorrow was met with love, not judgment, not silence, not absence. And as the tears fell, she felt a freedom she had never known, the beginning of a life restored by the touch of one who knew her completely. Amid her tears she heard it, soft, tender, almost like a breeze. "You are loved. You are not alone. I am here." No force, no urgency, only a quiet assurance that filled her heart. She blinked, unsure if she was imagining it, but the warmth in her chest confirmed the truth. Someone had come to stay. The voice did not demand her attention. It invited her to rest, to trust, to let go of the weight she had carried for years. And in that moment, her spirit, once heavy and shut, felt its first flutter of hope in decades. A small, almost hesitant smile appeared on her face. It was faint at first, like a candle struggling to glow in the dark. But as she breathed, as she let herself feel the touch and the whispered words, her chest lifted, and the smile grew warmer, fuller. For the first time in many years, her face reflected the life in her soul. She realized the heaviness had begun to lift, and even the small movement of her lips felt like a miracle. Mornings no longer felt like burdens to endure. Sunlight touched the room, and she noticed it as if for the first time. Even the simplest routines, making tea, tending her garden, opening the windows, carried a sense of purpose. She breathed deeply, feeling alive in a way she had not in decades. Life, she realized, could still hold meaning, even at her age, even after so much loss. And each morning became a gift, not something to endure, but to embrace. Tasks that once felt repetitive and empty now held subtle joy. Folding clothes became a rhythm of gratitude. Cooking a simple meal became an act of creation and care. Even sweeping the floor carried the satisfaction of movement, life, and presence. Her eyes opened to little details she had overlooked. A flower in bloom, a bird on the windowsill, sunlight dancing on the floor. Hope returned in quiet waves, not loud or demanding, but steady and sure, like a river that had been flowing all along, finally reaching her heart. She felt alive again, aware that each small step, each simple action, was part of the life he was restoring to her. She walked through her home with a gentleness that belied strength. Even simple choices, deciding what to wear, what to eat, where to sit, felt significant now. The fear that had once paralyzed her heart had loosened its grip. She no longer feared the silence, nor the empty rooms, nor the long hours alone. With each step, she felt the unseen hand of Jesus guiding her, encouraging her to trust, and giving her courage to embrace life once more. Her heart, once timid and wary, now moved with quiet assurance, ready to receive the blessings of each new day. Her heart, long closed by sorrow, began to expand. She welcomed the world around her, noticed the smallest details, listened with intention, and began to respond to life instead of simply enduring it. Even in solitude she felt full, for his presence was constant, steady, and unwavering. She smiled at birds, spoke softly to herself, and offered gentle words to neighbors. Her soul had learned to trust again, to live again, to be fully present in each breath. Evenings were no longer heavy. She sat quietly, hands folded over her chest, and felt a profound calm wash over her. No fear, no doubt, no sorrow could reach her in the presence of his love. Her house, once a place of emptiness, was now filled with quiet peace. She closed her eyes, listening to the stillness, knowing it was not emptiness at all, but the steady, faithful presence of Jesus. For the first time in decades, she rested completely. When her life on earth came to its gentle close, she did not fear. She stepped into eternity, and the one who had touched her heart and soul welcomed her with open arms. Every tear, every sigh, every silent prayer was transformed into a sacred memory of his love. Her grief, once heavy and endless, had been replaced by eternal joy. Even in eternity, her story whispers. When life seems unbearable, when tears fill the heart, his touch can heal, restore, and remain forever. Her soul, once weighed down by sorrow, now lived in the endless embrace of his love.